Okay, I think we are live if technology has served us. Hello out there, hello in here. Super excited to be here today with some of my favorite people. So welcome to folks who are joining from wherever you are. I know this is an inconvenient time zone for some, but we're doing our best to be global here. So as we get started, wanted to invite folks who are joining on the live stream to please share your name and where you're joining from, so we can start to build some community and belonging here in cyberspace. And to say just at the outset that today's event is a collaboration. So we are trying to practice liberatory governance and collective decision-making here in the room. And I'm grateful to my co-hosts, Chris Moore-Backman, maybe can wave at you, and Sean Andrew, who is joining us very bravely from Berlin at this very late hour, and Leonie Smith will also be speaking today. Helped co-conspire to come up with this event, and I'm grateful for their being here and helping shape it today. So I invite Sean and Chris to drop off camera. They'll be the ones communicating with you over the live stream. So those are the faces that you are chatting with out there in the world. And we're going to jump in just a second to introductions and let folks introduce themselves. You should have links in the YouTube description for folks. Unfortunately, Change Elemental is having some trouble with their website right now, but trust me, Natalie's awesome. So is Change. It'll be back up soon. But they'll have a chance to introduce themselves in their own voices in just a sec, and I will do the same. But before we do that, I feel like I'm speaking too fast and feeling some energy in my chest. So I'm hoping that Natalie will graciously lead us in a grounding exercise to help center in the space.
Thanks, Brian. Welcome, everyone. What an honor to ground this group today. We are going to do some breathing and tapping because the work of sociocracy, shared power, liberatory governance is embodied. So I want to invite you all to just get into a powerful stance that might be seated with your legs crossed or with your feet firmly on the ground, and my knees are kind of like a shoulders width apart, something that feels like stable and sturdy. And you can close your eyes or maintain a soft gaze away from the screen. I'm going to keep my eyes closed. And just take a few breaths. And practice noticing your breathing. The quality of your breath. The depth of your inhale. The length of your exhale. You don't even need to change anything, just notice it. And maybe on your next breath, experiment with a deeper inhale, a longer exhale. And then take your hands, your index and middle finger on each hand, and just like tap the outer corner of your knees. Tap your knees that help carry you, your achy joints. And then move up and then tap your hips. Kind of that point where you're sitting down, holding up your body. And then move up and tap your breastbone. Just where your heart is. Heart that carries all these feelings and emotions. It's moving blood through your body. And then move up and tap your temples. All the head space. All those swirling thoughts. And then if there's any other place in your body that needs some attention, you can tap there. Maybe your belly, the gut brain, house of nerves. I want to invite you to take 2 more breaths at your own pace. And when you're ready, open your eyes. Notice 3 colors in the room. And I think we're ready to get started.
Thank you. I feel better. Hoping folks out there also landing in the space, taking a break from wherever you're coming from and wherever you're returning to think about how you want to be together for the next 80 minutes or so. So we're calling this conversation Liberatory Governance and Belonging, and we're going to start with belonging as a way to ease into introductions so you know who all you are in conversation with today. So there's 3 prompts, which I invite Alanna, Ted, Natalie, and Leonie to take or ignore. And the first is I am. Answer that question if you like. My people are, and I belong with. Just an invitation to kind of reflect on those. And I will start, and then I think I will go as I see you on my screen. So Alanna, Natalie, Ted, and Leonie. So I am a father of 2 kids. This is the first full week of school for our kindergartners, so I'm feeling a bit of that right now. I am a husband, middle child, second of 4 kids. I live in Southern Oregon in a rural community at a redwood outside of my window. And I am a global citizen, kind of lowercase c. I don't really believe in borders and boundaries, but I do believe in mutuality and connection. And my people are people who try. I think Adrienne Me Brown talks about people who are working on excellence. I like the idea of holding these 2 truths of, on the one hand, we're perfect exactly as we are, right here, right now. And there's so much more space for us to grow and be better and be more fully ourselves. So can we honor those 2 truths and support each other in that journey? And I love people who help me do that, who are gracious when I fall and help me keep accountable to my own intentions. My people are bridgers, people who kind of span worlds, hold people together. Maybe that's the middle child in me. And I belong with the world. I think, we had a long debate when we were launching Building Belonging about, is building the right metaphor, the right word? And the answer is no, of course not, but it's nicely alliterative. So I'm a sucker for fun words. But the truth of belonging is we do belong, right? By virtue of our existence. And so building belonging is helping remember that truth. And so I belong with people who are trying to make the world reflect what we already know and feel, which is how we do belong. I belong with redwoods, ponderosa pines, cedars, Douglas firs. That's my kind of home bioregion here, northwest of Turtle Island. I live on lands that have been ancestrally stewarded by the Takelma and Shasta people. I belong with those who care for the land and each other. And I'm an uncle to a few nibblings, to some nieces and nephews. And I belong with people who take care of kids and enjoy being around young life. Let me pause there. I should also add that I define myself as a curator and a network weaver, which is partly what we're doing here today for Building Belonging, which is a collaborative that we can say more about. But let me pause and invite Alanna to take or leave that prompt.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm Alanna Irving. I am a mother of 2 small children, and I'm calling you from Aotearoa, New Zealand. I am a big nerd about non-hierarchical leadership and money and how it works in communities and just the nature of power in human societies. My people are, it's been very interesting as an American Kiwi child, transnational child of diaspora, to come here to a place where there's such a vibrant Indigenous culture, with very strong teachings about situating your identity in the story of your ancestors. And that sent me on a big journey of understanding my own connection to my people. So I'm Jewish, and my story, my whakapapa, goes back, whatever, 6,000 years, depends how you want to count. But I'm on a journey of discovering who I am in the context of my intergenerational story. And my people are people working for justice and equity in the world, and exploring all the complexities of what that means and how we live it in a day-to-day basis, and how we bring out the, I guess, just the best side of human nature with each other. I guess I just have a very deep belief. I'm a kind of naive idealist. I believe that human genius can come from anywhere, and every human has incredible worth. And I believe in building a society that recognizes that. And I belong with communities who are doing that work together. I am, some people see me as like an entrepreneur or an innovator, but I see myself as a community builder and a bit risk adverse or afraid to make big jumps on my own. And I really do my best work in community of others who share my values. So that's me.
Thank you. And I'll invite each of you to pass to the next person, so we can all practice here in the room, but I believe Natalie is next.
Sure, Natalie.
Well, thank you. Hello, hello. I am Natalie Baumdad. I'm a cis queer woman. I am a longtime resident of Washington, D.C., Piscataway land. I'm a dog person with 2 cats, adopted my partner's cats. I'm a really good cook. I am an auntie to my 2 nibblings. I am fostering a new puppy and very tired, very tired, day 2. I'm also on the 4-person shared leadership team at Change Elemental. My people are from Basra and Tehran. My people are spiritual people. My people are other queer people. My people are people who always make room at the table, who are always ready for a big party and crowd. My people are people who believe that there's a third way when it feels like everyone can't get what they want. I belong with people who are dreamers and poets and creatives, who are risk takers, and other just like impatient people who are like, we're working towards liberation, so let's like make that happen now in the structures that we're building and pull the future forward into the present. And I think I'm passing it to Ted, right? Ted, I'd love to invite you in.
Hello, hello. So I am Ted Rao, German citizen living in the US. I've lived here 10 years. I hold an identity as a linguist. That is actually something that very much influenced me. I spent 10 years in linguistics. I'm a transgender man, transitioned only a few years ago. I'm a parent. My people are, I think, I like what you said so far, but how in my words, it would be, my people are people who believe that humans are inherently good and want to create the environment so people can spend more time in that space. So I always believe that everybody is trying their best. My brain likes concepts a lot. My kids like dinner on the table, so that keeps me somewhat balanced. I honestly think I would have already worked myself to death if I had not been slowed down by children. So I'm very grateful for that. My oldest is 18, so it's been a while. So I belong with my children. That is the main thing. I thrive. I noticed just recently the teenager energy is, I think, the most exciting to me, because there's just so much, let's just do it better energy that I absolutely love in 17, 18, 16-year-olds. I absolutely love it. So just being around that is like recharging my energy when I feel like, it's been done, it's been tried, you know. I live in an intentional community with 70 neighbors. I've lived here for 10 years. Most of the people have lived here for much longer than me. So I'm the new person that just came 10 years ago. That's interesting. And I am one of the co-founders of Sociocracy for All, which is a nonprofit member run. And we are now about 200 people worldwide, something like that. And what we want to do is give people access to governance systems that allow more peer governance. And the for all piece in Sociocracy for All came because we wanted to have a system, or like have a way of sharing with people who want to hear it, no matter what, like no matter, you know, like not just the people who can afford it, or the people who happen to be in an industry where that's hip, and so on. So really kind of reach the 99%, that's the for all, not prescribing it, but offering it to everybody. And I think I'll stop here. And I have no idea who I'm handing it over to. Tell me, Brian.
Leonie.
Leonie, please.
Thank you, Ted. I am Leonie. My name means lioness, and it feels like a name that I get to grow into every day that I breathe. I'm a daughter and a sister and a really, really good friend. I am a founder of the Thoughtful Workplace, bringing people-centered solutions to organizations. I am the co-founder of People of Color for Nonviolent Communication, a support and learning space for BIPOC folks around the world interested in nonviolence. And I am the co-founder of Necessary Trouble Collective, an organization to support movements to stay connected with each other so they can be energized to take on the world's problems and bring us to a world that works for more and more people. My people are people of African descent. My family's history, much of which is lost in some ways due to the impact of enslavement. My family is from Jamaica. I'm born and raised in Canada, in Toronto. I currently live in Vancouver, land of the Coast Salish peoples on the west coast of Canada. And I belong to anyone who is traditionally marginalized, who is under the peg of other people's expectations, who feel pegged by oppression, who is longing to untangle themselves from the identities put on them to discover themselves. That's who I belong with. And I'm really glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm a compulsive note taker as well. And I'm like, oh, I just missed that last line. Oh, Leonie, slower. So thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, well, you all are getting to feel into each other a little bit, and hopefully folks who are joining live stream are as well. We want to pivot into the liberatory governance piece, liberatory governance and belonging. And the invitation here is to try to answer from our bodies. So sorry, Ted, we're gonna have to get out of that cerebral brain of yours for a little bit. And really try to get at the why. Why are you called to this work, Ted? Why did you co-found Sociocracy for All? Alanna, why are you a nerd for operations and governance? What's the calling? What's the heart in it for you? What's the deeper longing that motivates you to do the work that you do? I will absent myself from this round unless you draw me back in, and let me start in reverse order. Leonie, I will invite you to start, and then feel free to pass to whoever you want.
why I'm drawn to this work is really focused on, because I am, well, I put it in my Twitter bio, I'm completely preoccupied with my own liberation and that of other people. And part of it comes from a lived experience of being in spaces my whole life that are not built around me and my needs. And so for me, this work is about recognizing that we have lost a lot of ways that were known to us around connection because of systems, including those of oppression and racism. And for me, these types of liberatory structures, governance, they structure for me helps to give people confidence and give people tools that are ultimately about reconnecting to our deepest understanding of ourselves. So even though I geek out on policy, it's always with a sense of purpose. It's with the purpose of providing me as a participant in spaces with the ability to say and shape around my needs, and for me to be able to hear, absorb, accept, and if need to, challenge the needs of others in service to creating spaces that welcome more and more people. Complete. I pass now to Ted.
Thank you. Why am I drawn into this work? I think the first thing I want to say is because something about seeing people's energy and people's life blood, and you know, people give their projects all they have because they care about it so much, and then it fails because of governance stuff. That just pains me so much. And I think it is coming from just, I mean, there's something just so beautiful when people just do what they want to do. That's one thing. I want to celebrate that and allow that to happen. And I guess the other part is just deep respect for people's time and energy, and just not wanting to see it wasted. And it just happens so often. It drove me crazy already as a child. I remember arguing in maybe in 9th or 10th grade, arguing with my social science teacher about kind of the flaws of democracy. It drove me insane that just dismissed me like that. I was like, oh, you know, like, you can't say that. I'm like, well, but so it just, there were just so many moments where it was like, this can be done. I'm sure this can be done better. And this, I'm sure this can be done better. I don't mean it in a sense of kind of the quick fix, but more in the, I love this, the story of if you want to change the course of a river, walk upstream, walk upstream, walk upstream until it's just one tiny rock that you have to move and the whole thing changes. So I'm still, in a way, I feel like I've walked upstream for quite a while now, you know, and I'm still trying to understand, like, okay, but what's behind that? What needs to be changed so that becomes easier? So I'm just constantly walking upstream. That's what I'm doing. Yeah, but I think it boils down to just wanting to see everybody do what they're good at, because that's so beautiful. And I'll pass to Natalie, I guess. Natalie.
I'm just like still sitting with what you said, Leonie. I'm preoccupied with my own liberation, the liberation of others. And I think for me, like, and for Change Elemental and our experiments in shared leadership, you know, we don't know yet what the perfect shape is, or what like the right way to do, you know, this work of like sociocracy, of shared leadership, shared governance. But what's clear is that the path towards liberation needs to feel liberatory. And you know, for us, like our experiments in this space were both about problem solving for like current challenges and structures of oppression that were actually getting in the way of us like doing the work in the world that we wanted to do, but also as a way to like prefigure the future. So it kind of has like this really twofold importance to us. And yeah, so that we're prefiguring and shaping this vision while we're tending to the problems of the context that we're in. And yeah, I don't know if there's much more to say than that about like why this is critical for us or for me and important to me. Well, I'll pass to Alanna.
Thank you. I do this work because I am here for the Star Trek future. It's like the humanity fully realizing its potential of limitless possibility, post-capitalist liberatory society. And in some ways that kind of like intergalactic future seems so far away, but in another way, no, it's like it's right there. It's right there because I've seen that beauty in so many people of like, yes, you and you and you and you are all here for that society and can contribute to it in amazing ways. And then the rest of it goes back to what Natalie said about impatience. Like I'm super impatient for that, and just like, okay, let's get down to brass tacks. What do we need to do? Like, okay, how is this going to work? What tools do we need? Okay, money, okay, leadership, okay, people, like, software. What is it? Let's do it. Let's build it. So I guess that's my kind of orientation. And I guess discovering in myself that like my contributions to that space are this weird thing called leadership. But it's like, how do we do that in the liberatory way? How do I give myself in service to these movements and my unique talents in a way that brings out the unique talents of others? And this is why I build, I guess, really practical, immediately useful tooling, whether that's like software tooling for decision-making or dealing with money, or, basically APIs between that Star Trek future and where we are now, and how can we just start living it now?
I feel myself kind of resonating a little bit over here with different pieces of what each of you are saying. And I actually did want to add, I think, the problem is I start with the word I think. I should say I feel that for me, what's exciting about this is a chance to experience power differently. And for me, power and belonging are inseparable. And as someone who was socialized into more than my fair share of power, I've often found myself asking for belonging and getting power instead. I feeling like it's actually a pretty bum deal at some level. And what I really want, I spent a lot of time. So we have a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old, and with my 7-year-old, she's a natural leader, whatever that means. And I'm like, well, that's great, but like, are you also practicing following? I wish I got more practice as a follower growing up. And I found myself trying to shift the verb, like what's the active thing that is exciting about that? And what I've come down to is I want to experience other people's power and experience other people's gifts. And to do that feels awesome. But we're in a culture that stifles people's power and people's gifts, and it gives way too much to some people. So to be in a place where, everyone can be in their full power feels amazing when we get it right. And we're trying. All right, we're pivoting into some content here and inviting you all to discard a speaking order and just share space and ideas with each other as you feel called. This is the point where as a host, I panic because there's so much I want to bring up with you all, and I feel so influenced having experienced each of your power in different ways that are delightful for me. So I'm going to offer a very open prompt and invite you to take it where you feel called. So it's basically a rose and a thorn. What is something that you feel in your experience practicing grounded in that you can offer the group and say, yeah, this feels a no regrets move here. You can follow this path with some confidence. And what's a thorn? What's something that you really wish you had known 5, 10 years ago or 6 months ago, yesterday, or that you're still struggling with that feels like a pain point that you want to invite some collective wisdom around, both here in the room and on the live stream for folks who are also in practice. So I'm going to stop talking, and whenever any of you feels called, please fill the space.
what I can share is that for me, the rose is, as I said, that there's, a lot of experiments going on right now about different ways to bring forward like collaboration. People who are really wanting to grapple with the big questions that are contributing to a sense of people not having a sense of belonging or being seen. And for me, what I find really helpful in my work and in the communities that I'm also a part of is that the structure is an invitation. It's a bit of a pathway. It's a pathway with bricks missing and some broken pieces that allows us to move towards a type of collaboration and togetherness that is missing. And for me, the missing part comes from what for me is the lived reality of there being so many disconnects between people, particularly where we're talking about those who are on the benefit end of privilege and those who are not, that a lot of the ways that we were formerly habituated to find a sense of connection and togetherness have disappeared. And so for me, the structure is a way to give us a boost in that direction, to help to awaken, if we so choose, a new way of being, one that recognizes the humanity of more and more people. The thorn for me is that, particularly in connecting with people who are really steeped in dominant culture. And I do work in businesses and in organizations, and organizations are inherently inhumane. They're not built around human needs, that there's often a lot of reliance on those systems and an unwillingness to question whether their effectiveness and their readiness for dealing with some of the complexities, the complex questions that we're grappling with. This idea that we can think our way into being and connecting. And for me, these systems are there to help, but they're not the only road, and we can't rely on them without having a sense of, do we know the people who we're sitting across from in a room? Do we know what makes them tick? Do we know what makes us tick? Do we know what's influencing our ways of being? So that's for me, that's my rose and thorn. Complete.
Yes, that super resonates with me. The idea that it's like everyone, like, I feel like the question that at least I was asking at the beginning is like, what's the right structure? What's the right shape? And now that we have a shape and a structure, it's actually like, it's actually more about the ways of being within that structure. Like, what are the ways of being? And so I think the most helpful way of being that we are trying to cultivate, that has supported our shared governance kind of form, it comes from this image that we borrowed and kind of rejiggered from Alexis Pauline Gumbs. And she said, she feels most connected with 1 foot on water, 1 foot on land, or 1 foot in water, 1 foot on land. And the way that we've kind of reimagined that is, in order for this structure to work, when everything out in the world is forcing us to make a different choice, like capitalism, patriarchy, racism, we need to all be able to have both feet in both places at the same time, leading with our water foot, which is our vision and values, and the land foot, which is the reality of the world that we live in, being a trusted partner. So, and that's not something that individuals hold. It's not like everyone has 1 foot. We all need to be on both feet at all times, and shifting a paradigm where the land foot is leading, where it's like, you know, budgets and finances and, you know, whose name are we going to put on this like contract and like approval, like all these like little details that are ways the world is structured to keep us from sharing power and resources and to support power hoarding among a select few. That's the rose, I think, is that like learning that we've been able to do. The thorn is just like, this takes an incredible amount of resources and time. And it's just like hard to be set up to accommodate that. So I think like we would never have been able to do this experimentation without that, without a realization that this is going to happen slowly and it's going to take a lot of money and a lot of time.
I think for me, the rose is the very hands-on practical practice that I'm doing, that I see others doing, of like, okay, let's do this for real. And for me, that looks like, you know, facilitation or building tools or figuring out legal structures, like some stuff that I'm working on right now. In my team, we're doing a self-set salary process inside Open Collective Foundation, and, you know, working through what does that mean? How do we relate to this sense of value and this external world of monetary compensation? We're doing participatory budgeting with our community, planning how that's going to work. Participatory governance, and how can our wider community, you know, select our board members, and of course that Open Collective is a tool for collaborative communities. So we get to see thousands and thousands of them around the world doing amazing things, and offer them very practical sort of solve solutions to specific pain points around money and legal structures. And so that I found that all very satisfying. And that's when I feel like progress is being made, when I can like see it and feel it and touch it and live it. But I guess the other side to that coin, which is the thorn, is just the like, I feel like sometimes I knowingly sort of put on blinders, then I'm like, okay, I'm working away in my little corner, but oh my God, there's this incredibly huge looming like oh, capitalism, oh, like history of racial injustice, climate change. And just like, even if I think about any of these things, I just get so overwhelmed, and it's almost like the bigness. And also seeing the groups that we work with, a lot of the groups that we support at Open Collective are very like frontline mutual aid groups, or people working deep in communities where people have so many real pressing, incredibly important needs. Like people need food, people need, you know, medical care, people need, you know, this is the work that people are doing with housing. And it's just kind of like, I see how privileged I am that I get to play in this, you know, kind of rarefied space of experimentation and liberatory structures and stuff. But I guess I found my way to this work where I get to work in the background in sort of the infrastructure layer that then supports the people who have the skills and the energy and the right orientation to be on the front lines and directly working with, you know, the people with daily pressing needs. And that works for me. Like I am a mother of young children, I have a disability, I have a lot of reasons why maybe I'm not the one to be out pounding the pavement right now. So it's this interplay of like, it's okay, all I can do is carve out my little corner and work on my little tangible solutions. And if everybody around the world started doing that, then we'd solve these problems. And then the other side of like, oh my God, that's not enough. Oh my God, I'm not seeing the whole system. And that feeling's always right there. But I guess listening to all of you and knowing that there are many people out there listening to us, and that everyone is doing that work in their corner in their own way and in 1,000 ways that I could never do, and 1,000 kinds of wisdom that I could never have. And then I can just contribute my own little piece. Like I hope, and I believe, I have to believe that that's the answer, and that we're doing it. Yeah.
Yeah, not very surprisingly, I'm in a very similar world. When I was thinking about the answer to my question, I kind of, in my mind, it looks like this. So there's governance for me is what connects people and projects, and people, of course, and projects, but that's kind of that. And then on the other hand, there's the inner realm of people, right? And on the other side, there's how do institutions plug into the wider system. And I feel like I figured out the middle part, but now I get really impatient about left and right of it. It's like, there's just so much trauma. There's just so, like, it feels a little unfair that the new systems have to at the same time not only reinvent the wheel, but also do the cleanup from the previous system, and all the damage that has been happening. And that kind of falls on us as well now. It's just sometimes that is what gets to me, especially if then one is, I guess it's almost like an unfair comparison, of like, wait, this thing that we're building, that's really easy if we don't have to deal with the crap at the same time. Just for example, around economical systems and so on, the legal system, one of you mentioned it, I think Natalie, it was you, right? Just the maddening reality of the legal systems not wanting us to distribute power. And then we have to find our workarounds, right? So then it's on us to find a workaround again, because the system is the system, so that wider system. So that's I guess that's the rose and the thorn at the same time, right? The rose is, oh, there's something we figured out, but all the like the interfaces into the other kind of parts of the ecosystem, they are not the way I would want them. For example, one thing that gets to me that we haven't mentioned, I think, as clearly yet, to add one new piece here, is education, right? I typically have this line that I keep repeating because I feel like that's so obvious. We should say it 10 times a day till everybody knows it. We learn how to write essays in school, right? Up and down and again and again and again, write an essay, blah, blah, blah. We do not learn how to make a group decision. There is zero good reason for that. There's absolutely no good reason. So sometimes I say, Society for All does the work that does what you all should have been provided with by 8th grade. Unfortunately, you weren't. So now we have to do that too. Basic governance literacy, basic decision-making skills, all of that, facilitation skills, because it hasn't been done yet. And that sometimes really frustrates the heck out of me. And yet, I enjoy doing it. That's not the thing. But by the way, impatience is something that has been a theme here already between us, right? So the impatient part of me goes like, why hasn't this already been done a long time ago? Why are we still doing these things? Or like, why is there still so much to do? So that's my thorn.
Yeah, I'm reminded of Tyson Yunkaporta, who's kind of down in Alanna's neck of the woods, talks about the 10,000-year cleanup, right? Like it's a longer time horizon, and it's appropriate to be impatient inside of it. I'm bubbling with all kinds of thoughts and questions, and so is the live stream. So I want to maybe bring in one from Sherry Griffin, wherever you are out there in the world, that feels kind of like a theme that y'all were just wrestling with, which is nice, easy one here for you. How do you stay grounded in your heart, mind, and I might add body, when you are, quote, constantly paddling upstream? So in the face of the overwhelm that Alanna was talking about, in the face of the frustration that Ted was talking about, and the systems of oppression that are making this work hard that Leonie and Natalie were speaking to, what are some strategies? What do you do in yourself or in your collectives to stay grounded while Pakistan is flooding and the world's on fire? Easy one, if you would be so kind. Anyone who feels called. Not everyone has to speak as well. If there's something you want to speak to, feel free. There's a bunch more where this came from.
Part of it is probably self-deception on my part. Like, I literally just don't look to some degree because I know I can't do my work if I completely let it all in, because it will overwhelm me. And I know some people, like, there is a wonderful diversity of people's orientations about this. Some people love to look directly at the problem and get really fired up by how mad it makes them, or lots of different approaches, whereas I would just be burned out like a candle, I think, if I tried to do that. And so I have internal conflicts about this. It's like, am I lying to myself? Am I not am I hiding from reality? And then on another day I'll be like, okay, great, I feel really good about my choice to just do the work, keep working in the ways that I know that I can, and try to offer something of use to the world, and try to find others who are on the same journey, that we can do this together and get bigger and bigger. I think this is inherent to my worldview in some ways. My worldview is not a top-down system where it's going to be dictated what the solutions are. My worldview is a bottom-up, diverse, distributed, but I think there's like an inherent fear or something, because I'm just one little human. I can't see that whole thing at once. I can't understand the greater system to some degree. I can only zoom out so far. So there's like a leap of faith under there or something like that, that I have to just be like, okay, I'm one little cell in this great body, and I'm going to keep, doing my little work over here in my one cell's worth of work and believe that it can contribute. But yeah, I'm interested in everyone else's answers to this question, because I struggle with the same questions.
But my first answer to the question would have been, well, I don't. I'm the last person to ask on this one, I think. And then, like, how do you stay grounded? I don't. One answer that I've already given is my kids. And I was not joking about that. I really think that I would not survive. I noticed that because the kids go back and forth between me and my ex. And typically on day 4 without them, I kind of, my sense of purpose plummets. And then I need friends or my partner telling me, he always saying like, I'll remember that's always what happens when the kids are going like, right, that's what happens, it just somehow seems to dissipate, and then it comes back, because I think it's just one of the things that gets me out of thinking about it and just going, like we call it, chop wood, carry water. Whenever I think about what should I do, I come back to the very same thing that I am already doing. Then it's like, okay, thought that one through yet again. I guess I'll just get back to it then, and not get too jittery about the rest. So that's I've asked myself the question of, should I be doing something completely different a lot of times, and I do still come back. So that's maybe a sign that either I'm just on the same bias the whole time, or I am where I'm supposed to be, or both. I don't know.
For me, it's about having community. I'm fortunate that I spend a lot of my time with people who are grappling with a lot of the same questions that I'm grappling with. And for me, I also want to put a plug in for not being grounded, because I don't want us, I think there's a lot of harm in trying to hold ourselves to a kind of standard where we're in a place where we always know the right answer or always have a solution. I think that if you find yourself, this has been my lesson, if you find yourself in a situation where you are in a state of overwhelm, and the only thing that you can bring forward is any resources that you generate yourself, you don't have enough community. I really think it's important to have community to help you to grapple with the hard bits, and also to keep you connected to possibility, to enthusiasm, to holding of the world that includes that things are not inherently fucked, that there is a way to that there are creative solutions that are available. I prior to stepping towards my own work around decolonization, which is what led me to nonviolence, I would tell people, I have 2 friends, and oftentimes it feels like it's one too many. And now I can't have enough really good, deep relationships that welcome messiness and possibility and creativity and stuckness, and that welcome it all. And for me, that's been the way through.
And it kind of feels like that's the whole point of this. Like, if you share power, you get to share responsibility, and you get to share accountability, and you don't have to hold it all anymore. That's like why, that's like what makes this worth it. And I feel like, there are like magic moments that like keep me going where it's like, all right, we have $20,000. Like, how do we want to split that up amongst us? Say what you need, $20,000, and it's not split equally, it's split equitably. I'm just like, that kind of decision making just feels like magic. Yeah. And like the unit of change is relationships, is trust, is comfort with conflict, is all those things.
Love that.
Yeah, I resonate with all of that, both the not being grounded and finding community. This morning, I was supposed to be writing my talking points for this, and instead I went for a mountain bike ride because I needed to get in the redwoods and discharge some energy. And so just even trusting my body's demand and sort of honoring it in the face of, failing my sort of the productivity part of my brain that's like, but you're not gonna get it all done. There's a couple themes kind of weaving in the chat here that I want to see if I can pitch to y'all. More good, easy stuff here. Let's see. I'm going to name two and invite y'all to weave where you feel called. So one is, do you have to get the liberatory structure right from the beginning? Or is it possible to change an existing structure? Nice, easy one there. And then the second one, who's that from? Give some credit to where these questions come from. Argulas, is that where that came from? And there's another one about, I'm smiling because we've all been in this place. What if you think you're doing it right, but actually, what if you're like, oh yeah, we're horizontal, are you sure? So maybe an invitation for discernment as you're kind of building these structures and patting yourself on the back and thinking, cool, we're a co-op, it's all good. Is there some sort of gut check? Like, how do you know, what's the discernment? What's the smell test to know that you're on the right track? So they're kind of two slightly different questions, but I invite you all to speak to wherever you feel called.
Can I jump on the do you have to start that way question? Because I've spent a lot of time on that. It's so much easier to start out that way. But it's not impossible to switch. The problem is about switching. And by the way, we have a huge thunderstorm right now. In case you hear that. So the problem is also starting is not so easy, because how do you decide together to start in a horizontal way without somebody calling the shots that that's what you would do? So there's a bunch of tricky puzzle pieces there. So it really makes sense to look at that a little bit more closely. And then for switching, you almost have the same problem. If you implement something horizontal, top down, it's not really real, right? Because if it's mandated, how can it be real? And bottom up is also hard, because you kind of, unless you plan on outright revolution, which you're welcome to do, but if you want to work with a system, then you at least at some point you have to get the buy-in from whoever is at the person in power in the current system. So it has to be a both and in a transformation. There's really not a way around it, and that is pretty difficult to do. But if you have good stories to tell and some skills to prove that it's viable, then it can be done. It has been done. So those are the two paths to be aware of, I guess, that I can think of.
I mean, for us at Change Elemental, leadership transitions were really good moments to try something new and kind of reset. And that's sort of how our journey has looked. And, we're we very much had a culture of experimentation and small bets, where it's not okay, we're going from a total hierarchy to a completely flat organization. It's what are the skills we actually need to build to get us to that endpoint where we're sharing power and we're sharing resources and we're sharing decision making in ways that are aligned with equity. And I wouldn't say that we're we're not a totally flat organization. I think for us is how could we imagine another way outside of hierarchy or outside of a very rigid structure, and play with different forms of decision making in different arenas, with our board, with a leadership team, now with our whole staff, our whole organization. So maybe it doesn't have to be all or nothing.
I think that's just a really great point that you're making about, like you just said, we're not a totally flat organization. And I think just being willing to be honest, just being real, Like the nature of power is it's a dynamic property of human groups, which is constantly evolving. There's no way you can set just like, okay, we've set up power structures, it's done now, we'll never think about it again. It's a living thing. So if you're being real about it, then you are in this constant dialogue with each other and with the nature of group dynamics and with the nature of power that's constantly evolving. And people can tell, people can feel if it's authentic. It's so much better for someone to say, yeah, I'm accruing power to myself because of my status or because of my history or because of my personality or whatever it is. Now let's work together and talk about how distributing power could work. And the people we need to hear from most in that conversation are the people who have least access to that power, probably. But there's a lot of people, a lot of very well-meaning people who try to kind of wave a magic wand and go, okay, we have no bosses anymore, job done. But, you know, this is well known. This has been talked about for generations, you know, the tyranny of structurelessness, and just like, yeah, it's about building active systems of an alternative and about evolving those systems together, and about being real when it's not working, or when we haven't successfully distributed power, or when the structure isn't serving, and being willing to talk about it, being willing to change it. I think if you're in a situation where the story is something about shared power, but you actually feel that you don't have access, or you feel you are being squashed by the system, or it's toxic, or it's hurting you, or whatever, then no, it's not real, and should be honest about that. And if you are in a situation where you have like a hierarchical power structure and you have aspirations to something different, be willing to be honest about claiming the power that is there, and working on it together.
I just want to also, sorry, Brian, I want to jump in here because one of the things that I'm often dealing with and supporting clients, for example, is that there's been this great move, for example, there's been a great move to diversify organizations of all types, organizations, communities, intentional communities, faith communities, etc., that came out of this latest movement that came around in response to the killing of George Floyd that's happened in 2020. And as a person with lived experience, as a Black woman, and also as a person who's deeply connected to many people who come from traditionally marginalized communities, one of the things that I invite people to consider is that as you are diversifying who's part of your organization, who's part of your faith community, whatever kind of network that you're in, is that the way that you started things was often not built around any of the needs of those people. And I speak from lived experience. As a Black woman, I'm not interested in status quo. I don't care for it at all. And what that means is that even with these structures, with the label of liberatory structures, for us to be open to the idea that some of the ways that we have done things, including ways in which we may have been rewarded, have actually come from, for example, systems of oppression that don't welcome the humanity of all people. So what does it mean then to look at expectations in a workplace when you're looking at, when you're diversifying your workplace? What does it mean, for example, to have an individual holding a power, which is very much part of the dominant system, as opposed to someone who's coming from a kind of community that I come from, where there's a collective understanding of what power is. So sometimes it's not that you necessarily have to smash the paradigm, but to be open and to be curious, really, to be really curious about whether or not the systems that you have in place, even if they're labeled as liberatory or teal or whatever your buzzword is, have they been built with an understanding of people who don't come from the dominant culture? And if so, what can you learn from other ways of being, that existed before, that weren't published in a book, that you can't take a class for? What can you learn from those things? And the last thing that I'll say is that in addition to structure, there's the skill piece. So for example, around, it's incredibly valuable, as you've heard others people share, that for there to be some kind of feedback system that exists within communities, within organizations. But the other question to ask is, if I'm speaking to somebody, does that person have the ability, the skill to listen and to extract meaning and to work through their sense of awkwardness or to handle impact? Because the system won't fix that. That comes from our own individual commitment about our own skill level and what it takes to actually build connection and community.
Yeah, and to Ted's point, the education system is not necessarily building robust capacity in our elementary, middle, and high schoolers to handle conflict and navigate impact. And I'm very lucky to work with Leonie. So when I screw up, I call her in a panic and say, can you help me sort through the impact I'm clearly having and not sufficiently aware of? Ted, I say come off mute. I was going to throw one more question out there, but why don't you jump in?
Yeah, I just wanted to add one piece. But you sort of even said it now. I wanted to go towards, well, you know, I know there's always this kind of mindset versus structure thing. And it's, I mean, I assume we all agree, yes, both, you know, like not doing this playing one against the other game that happens so much out there. But one piece that worries me when people only refer to, well, you'll feel it when it's wrong, is that some people don't feel it when it's wrong. Right, because they've been so disenfranchised from their own, they literally don't. So what I sometimes tell people is, you know, on the structure side, how about you add a little bit more clarity and a little bit more something with safety net and feedback in particular. I'm so glad, Leonie, you mentioned it too. Like the feedback into your thing, because maybe somebody is not speaking up, somebody might not be noticing, like just relying on people being in touch with themselves is risky from my point of view. So we always have to kind of double up on all the sides. You know, of course, people have to do their work, but that's easier said than done. So all the both ends of all of that and a little extra is kind of where I always go.
Yeah, cheers. I see some enthusiastic nodding here. Yeah, and building belonging, we talk about this concept of I, we, world, right? That it's individual transformation, interpersonal work, and systems all are interacting with each other. And one or even two alone is not necessarily enough because we get pulled back down. I want to play with the concept that Alanna was kind of just spinning around individual and collective power. And there's a couple of questions in the live stream around sort of a horizontal organization. And I know this group has worked through the complexity of the tyranny of structurelessness and some sort of structure, but I think there's a hope that I often see in the DAO communities. I'm not even sure what that stands for anymore. But as people are excited about, oh, new ways of working, new ways of making capitalism a bit more efficient, there's a risk that we say, oh, it's just self-organizing. Oh, this will be horizontal. That'll take care of that. And my suspicion is that you all have encountered that that is not entirely accurate. So I want to give a quote from Alanna, actually in a podcast on the comments, where she said, "There's no such thing as self-organization. There's only unseen, unacknowledged, and unaccountable leadership." And I think I was like riding my bike when I heard that and like pulled over. I was like, wait, say that one more time. Let me copy that down. I checked the transcript, which I don't think exists, but that is what she said. And I love it. So I'm going to drop it here in the chat. And I guess I'd like to invite Alanna to start by unpacking that incredibly audacious statement. And then invite y'all to respond.
Thanks for putting it on the spot. Yeah, this is that part. It's not me trying to be.
I'm going to ask you a question about this.
Yeah. Yes. that little sort of ranty statement comes from being annoyed that people don't want to acknowledge all of the care work, the facilitation, the space between the leadership. I call it leadership, but my definition of leadership is broader than the sort of traditional top-down leadership. It's a much more diverse understanding of, you know, all the skills that need to go into helping a group of people or an organization function. And I do feel like anytime self-organization is talked about, it's some sort of hand wave all of that away. And no, we actually need to look at it. We need to look at the skills that are required. We need to acknowledge the care work. We need to acknowledge the container making, the structure building, the relationship building. All of that is the kind of leadership that goes into a healthy culture, especially a healthy non-hierarchical culture. And yeah, like DAOs. I've got a half-written blog post called DAOs Are Boring, which is about how DAOs are like just a really complicated voting mechanism, which is great for things that are highly quantifiable, which is why most DAOs are about governing a cryptocurrency community, because it's highly quantifiable. Most of human endeavors are not highly quantifiable. They're qualitative experiences that are hard to reduce to numbers. And so DAOs are like kind of focusing on what I consider the least interesting 5% of participatory governance problem space, and oftentimes don't acknowledge the very, things like a history of power in our society that informs how power is functioning right now in our groups, or very human sorts of needs and very human sorts of care work. So I guess that's where that came from. And I'm just interested, anytime that somebody says, oh, we're self-organized, it's almost like it's an invitation that I go, okay, let's peel back the layers and see, how are you actually organized? Who is actually doing the work? Who is actually holding this group together? Sometimes it will be an acknowledged leader, and oftentimes it will be an unacknowledged person with a job title like coordinator or something, who everybody knows is the lifeblood of the whole community, but is, because of the way that we understand leadership, the way what we inherit of understanding leadership from our default society, that is not properly understood or acknowledged.
I love it. Other thoughts, reactions, feelings?
What's coming up for me too is like the gifts that people bring that support power sharing, that are like underfunded, under-acknowledged, under-resourced, underappreciated. And I think like, in the space, in like social justice spaces and the spaces that I am operating in, it's mostly like Black femme women who are holding roles of like water calmer, of naming the elephant in the room, of like doing a grounding, and so I think part of what is needed is to both actually acknowledge where their skill and expertise and where that understanding kind of comes from, and also try and shift that paradigm sometimes as well. So like maybe the woman on the team, like the one woman on the team, isn't the one that's like always taking notes and always like scheduling the next meeting, right? So and how do we play around with that? And I think for us, it like required us to be really honest about like what we were good at, what is a growth edge, and what we wanted to learn into, because it was important from a values perspective. And kind of have all those conversations. And like what skills like translate into cultural currency, like with funders, or in like certain spaces or others, and like all that's got to be on the table, because it's like a way of naming power.
Yeah, and if you don't name it, you can't hold it accountable. If you don't actually talk about how things are organized, you can't talk about how it's working or how it's not working, or how we want to change it, or how it's equitable or not equitable. And if people aren't given a mandate for leadership, there's also not a safe way to hold them accountable for the outcomes of their leadership. And yeah, I'm just interested in this collective project of what if we unmoored ourselves from the baggage of what leadership has meant in our capitalist hierarchical society, and really deeply reinvented what we want it to mean for us in our collaborative practice.
And that's, yeah, just remember, I always felt very conflicted about the term leadership. And let me also just throw in there, for example, we are not a horizontal organization, never claimed to be. We're a peer-oriented organization, but horizontal suggests that there's just kind of, oh, we're flat, the horizontal. I don't know, it's tricky. It's really tricky because it depends on what people mean with it. we're horizontal in some ways, and in other ways there are levels that nest into other levels, and that's the hierarchy there is, that's acknowledged and known and chosen. But the thing I wanted to go to is leadership. So I was struggling with the concept of leadership. And actually, I remember there was a performance review that we did, which is like a consent-based 360 kind of format. And my colleagues sent me to get some coaching around leadership, because it was so, the internal conflict that I was feeling kind of manifested, of course, as these things do, to the outside. And I was so grateful, because that was, I don't know, 5 years ago or so, and I've really been at ease with leadership now, and also to whole leadership and so on. But it didn't just, it didn't just happen. It needed some work to get there.
Leonie, anything to offer here? Should we move on?
I'm good. I'm interested in the next question.
Yeah, well, we're about 15 minutes or so left. And I guess the two themes that feel really alive out in the chat have to do with sort of a general request for communities of practice. I think a sense that, like, yeah, sure, how do we do this exactly, and with whom do we practice? So luckily, the four of you all embedded in communities of practice in different ways. Maybe this is an invitation to speak a bit to that. Sean and Chris, who are off camera, are also leading a lot of this work in their own ways. So that's one. And the second, I think, is maybe a desire for kind of some, it's not here in the chat, but the word that I'm thinking of is capacity. Like, what are the skills that have to be in place for this actually to work? So I think I want to invite us to kind of move softly towards close, and really an invitation towards kind of concrete practice. So a lot of folks are kind of generally resonating with the theory, and lots of effusive agreement out there. And yet it's like, okay, I know I don't want to work in this coercive top-down hierarchical organization, but what exactly do I do? So maybe the invitation here is, as folks close out of here and go back to wherever they were coming from, dinner tables, organizations, collectives, schools, what's something they can do? What's an easy place to start, safe enough to try, that can start building that muscle of liberatory governance in their families, wherever they are? So maybe I'll call a speaking order here, and then we'll give a chance to close. So as I'm seeing, it's going to be Natalie, Alanna, Leonie, Ted. If there are thoughts you have on, yeah, where can we start? What's a place to start?
Okay, the first thing that popped into my mind when you asked that question, Brian, is reframing compromise not as like someone wins and someone loses, but thinking about like asking the question of like, what's most important, or what's like the value underneath this, and making space for something new to emerge or to co-create, like when it feels like there is like difference of opinion or things are at odds with each other. Do you want me to pass it? Oh, okay, yeah, Alanna.
I think Brian said me. Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, I make very sort of tangible, practical tools, which I just want to offer everyone. And they're not panaceas. They're not for every situation. They're for very specific problems or, situations that you might be in, but if they are useful to you. So Open Collective is a tool for transparent money fundraising and also fiscal sponsorship. So groups can go under the umbrella of an existing legal entity. If you are a distributed group who isn't a company or a charity, or you want to access, philanthropic funding and you need a 501c3 or whatever, it's sort of a bridging thing to unlock potential for collaborative groups in very practical ways. Open Collective Foundation is our US 501c3 umbrella entity, so you can have a group under there if you need that status. And we're also a testing ground for, I would say, liberatory practice. We're doing things like I mentioned self-set salaries, and we have an initiative called Solidarity School where we're doing learning and development for all kinds of collectives, basically. So and we're very transparent and public about this. We just want to learn in public. Open Collective as well is doing a thing called Exit to Community, where we as a company are transitioning from being owned by shareholders and founders to being owned by our community at large. And we have no idea how that's going to work. We're completely learning in public. We're doing a podcast, we're doing a blog series. So if you're interested in learning along with us, that's there. We wrote a book with a bunch of people from Inspiro called Better Work Together. It's not a prescriptive book. It won't tell you how to community. It will just, it's a whole bunch of stories. Like, here's all the mistakes we made. Here's all the things we've learned. Here's the things we tried. So I feel like every community is completely unique, like a living creature. And therefore you can't say how they should be, but sharing stories between all of our communities is kind of the way we learn collectively. So that's what that's about. We're doing a conference called Doing Better Work Together coming up at the end of November. It's an online conference designed to work across lots of time zones. So that's going to be practitioners coming together to share stories and learning and stuff like that. So people are invited. So those are some of the tangible things. And if any of them are useful, I would be happy. I've previously made some software called Co-Budget for participatory budgeting and Lumio for collaborative decision-making. So those are other examples of very practical open source software tools that people can take and use and put into practice in their day-to-day work.
For anyone who's panicking about trying to capture everything Alanna just said.
Sorry, we'll share the URLs.
we will, I promise we will send out kind of a harvest after this with some of the links. So don't sweat it if you're capturing it live. Before we go to Leonie, I wanted to get back to Natalie and see if she wanted to add anything about the work that's happening at Change, if there's ways, Change Elemental, if there's ways to follow what you're doing, or is a community practice that people can follow your learning.
Yes, we have written very candidly about our journey towards liberatory governance on our blog, on our website. We also, part of our work internally is work that we do in the world with other groups and organizations. And so we are always looking for folks who are asking similar questions to us and want to be co-learning. There's no formal way, there's no formal community of practice for that, but I invite you all to go to the Contact Us page of our website. And we'll get back to you. We're always interested in training. Our website is down right now, so don't go today, go tomorrow.
Thank you, Natalie. Sorry, Toby, chiming in. I was gonna go to Leonie next, and then.
Yeah, for me, the one thing I would invite people to do does center on that piece around community. The next time you have a feeling in your gut or an inkling or in some way feel disconnected to somebody, can you take the step to reach out to that person and to share what's up for you in service to your collective purpose and your own ability, authenticity, and willingness to show up? That, I think, is the invitation for us to start to step with some vulnerability towards those types of connections and conversations. And the thing that I would invite people to is that I am, along with my co-founder, Necessary Trouble Collective, Catherine Strickland, and with East Point Peace Academy, that we are launching something called the Beloved Community Well. And it is a practice group that will be every Wednesday. And we invite people who are part of movements, who are part of nonprofits and communities to come and to connect and to gain practical skills, to try out little experiments like the one that I've offered to you all. So I invite you to check out eastpointpeace.org, which has the registration links. And our first session is on the 21st of September, and that's a BIPOC session, and all other sessions will be welcoming all folks. Complete. Ted.
So communities of practice, places to practice is kind of my favorite prompt to answer to, because I find it so powerful. So I want to mention two parts here. So as I said in the beginning, Sociocracy for All is a membership organization. Yet it's a working organization, so we do require for people to understand how it works before joining, because we need to get things done. So imagine it like a language that you need to speak in order to work with others, so you're on the same page. But we have kind of a community that is kind of like a ring around it, like communities of practice. Again, it's good to have some experience with, for example, consent-based decision making, so that you are in the same reality and kind of want to talk about similar things as people there. But that exists. There are books that you can find. One resource I want to mention is our resource page on our website, sociocracyforall.org, that has, for example, a free ebook that one can share, and like all kinds of that's kind of everything is pulled together there that is just available for free. The last thing I want to practice, because it's timely, is a training that was our very first training, because I remember we were driving back from a workshop, my co-trainer and I, and we were in the car thinking like, okay, great, now we did a training, but you can't really learn anything in a training, because all of a sudden you're in your own organization, everything is different again, because then there's this person that annoys you, right? And then you don't really know what to do, and there's nobody to help, blah, blah, blah. So we were thinking like, oh, wouldn't it be great if one could just plop people into sociocratic organizations and that they can just experience them? And then we said, well, maybe one could do it online. Maybe one could just do it like a pop-up organization just for a while. And that's what we did. So, and we've now been running those for years. It's called SALT, and maybe somebody's going to put it into the chat for you. So that's great fun, because it's all simulation, it's all play together. And I think I keep coming back to practice, right, as one of the ways to experience it in your own body and with other people, in relationship with other people, instead of reading about it, because the reading about it, that's like reading about, whatever, healthy like exercise or something. It doesn't it's the doing that is changing things. And it is, yes, I will put it into the chat here so it can be passed on to the people on YouTube, and I'm complete.
Yeah, I think, one of the things exciting for me about this moment is I think people are hungry for different ways of being, different forms of practice. And, certainly for the first time, it feels like in my lifetime, demand wildly exceeds supply. And so part of the intention for this conversation is to help highlight some of the supply that is out there and help kind of delineate where folks can find some good tools. I want to offer one that is for folks with your parents or if you're roommates. The one that has been a really fun practice, fun if you're a nerd like me and enjoy this kind of stuff, is each morning on the weekend on Saturday before we decide what to do with our kids, right, with our 5 and 7-year-old, is we say, okay, everyone needs to name 2 desires, those two longings you have for the weekend. And invariably it's things like play in the dirt, go to a playground, right, like read a book. And mom and dad get a voice as well, moms, dads, plural, whatever's out there. And then the goal is to have the best proposal that meets everyone's needs. And I am consistently shocked at how good our kids are at, I'll be sitting there thinking, what about, and they'll come up with something in no time flat. And we all like, oh yeah, that works. That's great. So even the practice of not trying to overrule people or have a majority where one person's pissed and you drag them around the zoo the whole time, right? But like actually a place where it's in mutual consent feels really exciting. One more thing to share, and then we'll invite a closing round here in the group and invite folks to share a closing checkout out there in the world, wherever you may be. So I've been enjoying the chat and seeing lots of really some folks out there who I know who are also deep in practice. And so the limitation of the YouTube live stream is that y'all are out there, and so it doesn't do a great job of building belonging. So we want to create a space that we can get together in a few weeks' time for those who either weren't able to join the live stream or want to deepen into this conversation, because there's lots of wisdom out there as well. And so we'll share a registration link. We're going to have a Zoom conversation that's just an open Zoom space for whoever wants to show up and deepen into practice. It's going to be super lightly hosted. Sean and some of his team at Former for the Future are going to help hold it. But really it's just a space to be in practice. So a lot of you were asking about communities of practice. This is a small one we can create. And we can grapple together. Oh, good. Here's a nice, easy last question from Argulas. How do you inspire and build belonging? No problem. Easy one. So yeah, folks want to chime in on that in the chat. the question I'll bring to the group here is, I no longer feel moved by my previous question, but maybe maybe if you want to share just a moment in your life or a time when you do feel belonging, and we'll go back to that place. Whoever feels called, start, and then please pass.
I have a favorite story. One of my kids, so there are 5 of them, right? One of them, number 2, learned lacrosse, which I was not so super interested in because I don't know, I just wasn't. But she was doing lacrosse, and we drove past a lacrosse field, and she said, "Hey Ted, can we get out and I can explain to you the rules of lacrosse." And I did this like parent thing of like, like getting out of the car with everybody, blah, blah, blah. And she said a sentence that really turned me around, and it lasted. She said, "But Ted, for the last few years, we've always learned everything together. How can you not want to learn what I'm excited about?" It's like, yes, I absolutely want to learn every rule of lacrosse right now, because learning together is kind of a love language, and telling each other what we've learned, that to me is as belonging inducing as it gets.
Really want to second what Ted said earlier about just embodied practice and doing it for real. And those are the times when I felt belonging, in practice with community, making mistakes, getting it wrong, not knowing, stumbling through, all of that is part of it, but just working on it together for real. Being on the journey in community, that's what makes me feel belonging. And I also think is an answer to some of the other questions about, how can people who are interested in this proceed? Just literally, whether it's in your family, whether it's, starting a savings pool with your neighbors, whether it's, shifting how things work in your workplace, find a way, or faith community, a hobby community where you can be together as peers and sit in a circle and talk about how to do this stuff together. How do we govern ourselves together? And I think amazing things will happen if you just try it. Pass to you, Natalie.
I feel like I'm gonna make my mom proud, and like I quote a Rabbi Hillel from my my Jewish people, and he says, "If I am not for myself, who will be for me? If I am only for myself, who am I?" So the places where, like, when I really feel belonging is when I am advocating for my own like freedom and liberation, and when I am like connecting that to like the freedom and liberation of other people, and like it's just all happening. And I will pass to Leonie.
For me, belonging is around being able to show up. And when I have, which I experience with some frequency, a sense of being welcomed, even if I'm not showing up in excellent ways, that's when I feel belonging, when I can express myself with some vulnerability. Complete.
Yeah, I changed my answer 8 times while y'all were talking. I think mine has to do with individual like striving in a collective container, which I think is a version of what all of you were saying. And I play competitive sports, and for me, it's like, it's great if I play well, but there's a whole other realm of experience that is collective collaboration for something greater than our individual selves. So kind of Natalie's idea, but doing it together in service feels very alive for me. And hanging out with my kids, that's great too. Thanks to everyone for joining us. Thanks to the group here who have been very generous with their time. I know it's tough trying to find a time zone that works for everyone. I know this is an evening on the East Coast of the US and very late at night for Sean and co in Central Europe and Africa. So we will share the recording, we'll share a harvest. And we'd love to hear what resonates for y'all. So thanks for folks who are chiming in the chat. yeah, this is an effort in collective sense making and collective decision making, right? So the practice of liberatory governance in this dual space is, yeah, what's alive? How do we be better? How do we work together? So I hope some of you will choose to join us in a couple weeks' time. But I'm going to end the live stream here, and thank you all for being with us, and hope that you will continue to share.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
Brian.
you.